Welcome back to Fifth of Jack Gaming, where today we have the grizzly old veteran, where it's very plausible to be able to come to the resources that we end up needing to jump on the ship of Bear Force One. That's right, we're covering Bear Force One. We ended up doing some updates, so with that, let's dive in over at the folks of Knoxfield and be able to show you what we ended up doing and what's the newest update with Bear Force 1. We have an idea with multiplayer to be able to help out, trying to spread it out, trying to make it a little bit better. Without further ado, let's swipe our way over to Moxfield. Alright, so we barely made it over here to Bear Force 1. So this is going to be a commander deck that's going to be featuring our queen, the one, the only, Ayula, Queen Among Bears. This art has so much amazing bear art into it. Whenever you see it, it's something new that ends up adding to it. So, our commander is a mono green monstrosity of a bear. Why is that? Well, let's start off. She only costs us 2, 1 green and 1. So we can get her out early to be able to get her set up. She's a 2/2, 2/2 for 2, so it's a bear, naturally. And then whenever a bear enters the battlefield, we get to choose one. We could put either 2 +1/+1 counters on a target bear, or we could have a target bear fight another creature that we don't control. All amazing abilities. We're dived in more farther into the +1/+1 counters with it being multiplayer, making our queen bigger and quicker. She has a chance to be able to kill someone, or swipe someone, or maul someone to death with commander damage. But also, sometimes we end up having to remove it. So this is where we take a nice little plausible swipe and fight another creature that we don't control. Breaking down the commander, we'll jump over and cover the planeswalker. We only have one planeswalker in this deck. Vivian the Arcbolt Ranger. The main reason that we have her is because of the +1 ability of destroying 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. They gain trample until end of turn. This deck needs trample. You can end up making that creature as big as you want, but you can have a 20/20 or anything like that. But if you don't have trample, a little 1/1 can end up getting in the way and make it so that you can end up wrecking the entire battle for us. So that trample plays a big role into us. And then we gotta end up having protection for the queen and ways to get other bears out there. So we have that in shenanigans with our sorceries, where we have Green Sun Zenith. It's a spell that costs us 1 green and X. And we get to search our library for a green creature with a converted mana cost of X or less, and put it onto the battlefield directly. So most of the time when I end up using this, for this little guy, Werebear. Why? Because he gives us a little bit of ramp. And then we always like to have that ramp. But the best part about this tutor is that once we use it, we can end up shuffle it back into our library to hopefully draw it again to be able to tutor out something else. Grizzly Fate is exactly what it says. It's a Grizzly Fate, where we get to put two green bear tokens into play. But if we have Threshold, we get to put 4 instead. Also has a flashback. There's been a couple times where you end up getting multiple bears coming out and triggering Ayula to be able to get that final little bit of damage to maul your opponent to death. Because the best removal is player removal. That's right, you heard that first. Triumph the Hordes is another way we can end up having another win con with this. It gains our bears infect, which that means we have to do only 10 damage to each opponent to be able to take them out. You can end up spreading that over, but that's not the main reason that we have it. Sure, to get a +1/+1, but the big thing is trample. Permanent that's going to be in our way? Well, we'll dash into our instance and use Beast Within. Takes out any permanent. Could be land, planeswalker, anything. If it's something that we don't want to be having on there, and we don't want, or we can't fight it, we can end up making it into a 3/3 beast. Quite simple, straight to the point. Force of Vigor allows us to do some shenanigans. When they think we're all tapped out, we can exile a green card and be able to destroy 1 or 2 target artifacts or enchantments. And enchantments. Heroic Invention is our first piece that ends up protecting our queen. This is a big thing that comes over with it because there's ways that we can end up gaining, or this gains, our permanents gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So they go board wipe the board, and we gain indestructible. Everyone else's creatures get destroyed, but we end up still having our bears right there ready for action. I've done that a few times to be able to take over the game and win it. Inspiring Call does the same thing, but only with creatures that have +1/+1 counters. Also, you end up drawing a card for however many creatures that you have that has a +1/+1 counter. Nice little draw fuel and a nice little line of protection. Corrosion Grip destroys enchantments and artifacts with split second, so that means they can't end up responding to it. Reclaim lets us bring back something that will go on the top card of our library. So this is a utility spot of 1 of 3 cards that I was thinking about. Obviously, Return of the Wild Speaker is one of them. Riskar Expertise, or Greater Good, which is an enchantment. Greater Good allows us to sacrifice a creature. We draw how many cards based off the power. We have to discard 3. Riskar Expertise allows us to pay 5, draw however much the power is, and then be able to play a card from our hand. Or, where you have Return of the Wild Speaker, which is the one I decided to try with this deck, ends up giving us draw fuel, but it also gives us a way to be able to finish off or put us over the top where it gets +3/+3. It doesn't give us trample, but it gives us a nice little buff. So I don't know how that's going to end up working out, but that's the way I ended up trying to go over. The next spell is a protection spell, which is Snakeskin Veil. Gives us hexproof, or gives a target permanent or a target creature hexproof, and a +1/+1. More damage that we can end up getting out of there. And the +1/+1 is a +1/+1 counter, so it's not just like just a normal +1/+1. Hexproof is kind of nice too. Worldly Tutor allows us to be able to look and be able to figure out what kind of creature that we want, and we can put it on top of our library. And then we always got to have a rocky soil, so you got to end up having your artifacts where you have Arcane Signet that only taps for a green, but it's a little bit of rampage that would be able to help us out getting our queen out. Well, I guess it's the same turn that we go over with it. But a little quick tip is that this is going to help us to be able to play other stuff and play more bears. Conjurer's Closet allows us to get more advantage out of the bears that we have in there because we get to exile a bear and have it come back at the end step, so it's another bear we can have trigger with Ayalula. Emerald Medallion costs 2 and then makes your green spells cost 1 less to play. We're in a mono green deck, so it helps us out all the way around. It's better than having our bears trigger once. It's having it trigger twice. We have 2 claws, so we might as well fill it up as much as we can. Pain Harmonicon allows us to have our queen trigger an additional time whenever we play another bear. Rona's Monument makes our green creatures cost 1 less. Also, when we cast a green creature, or whenever we cast a creature, a target creature that we control gets +2/+2 and gains trample. Like I said, trample is huge for this deck, and this will end up helping us get through. Talking about trample, Shadow Spear does that, gives us lifelink, and we can pay 1, and a target permits an opponent's control, lose hexproof, and indestructibly until end of turn. So we can end up having our queen fighting all those people that we wouldn't be able to normally fight with this bad boy. Soul Ring is the standard staple. You get 2 colorless mana for the price of 1. Swiftfoot Boots is more protection. Hexproof Haste, the Great Old Bird Boots. In the case, people would say this is the boots with the fur. Great Hinge allows us to end up having 2 green mana. You gain whenever you tap it, you gain 2 life, and then whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield that under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. More draw fuel is amazing. I said that earlier that we ended up switching over into where more counters matter and keeps on going with that. Ozolith is the main reason that we end up having this right here. Because we could end up having a bazillion counters and that creature ends up getting taken out. Then what happens to those counters? They just magically go away. But if we have the Ozolith out there, they'll go on Ozolith and we'll be able to be next turn, make our queen again ferocious with those counters. So we'll leave the stars of the show, the creatures, over here for last. So we're going to jump over on this side of it. And we're going to just into their enchantments. Bear Umbra is a nice Umbra because we end up gaining +2/+2. And the creature has, whenever it attacks, untap all lands. That's right, all of our lands. That's amazing. But it also has a hidden little way to be able to protect our queen with Totem Armor. If a enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So that means this Totem Armor will be able to protect our bear. Untapping the lands is a nice little top off. Branching Evolution is a nice enchantment that allows it to cost 3, and we get to put, if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a target creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters that are put on that creature instead. So Doubling Season is a nice card. It's super expensive, but it costs us 5. So it's a really, really expensive for what it does. Granted, it's nice. It has double tokens, double creature or counters and stuff like that. But I can't see us flipping the kind of money for that. But this Branching Evolution is amazing for the deck because we end up doubling any amount of counters. And if you notice, our queen puts 2 +1/+1 counters. So each time we play a bear, we can put 4 +1/+1 counters on something and make it a quite big threat. Canopy Cover, more protection because the enchanted creature gains pretty much hexproof, and it can't be blocked except for by creatures with flying or reach. It's kind of surprising how much that actually plays a big role into us. Glorious Sunrise is another thing that ends up giving us trample. Or we have an option to draw a card. If we control a creature with power of 3 or greater, gain 3 life. Or a target land, you can tap it, add 3 mana until end of turn. It's a nice flexibility that comes with the enchantment. I know I just talked about how Doubling Season costs us 5. But this gives us trample. We need trample. Trample is the number one thing that we need that goes with all these counters. Talking about the counters, we have Hardened Scales that allows us to add another +1/+1 counter whenever we put 1 or more on there. So it ends up being a nice way to be able to add a little bit more damage and be able to put a nice little bigger clock on a person. So then Anthem is an enchantment where all of our green creatures get +1/+1. Buff it up a little bit, and whenever we play a green creature that enters the battlefield under your control, we get to scry 1. Scrying is another pseudo kind of way of drawing where we get to see the top card and we can put it at the bottom, or we can keep it on top, which is amazing that it comes over with it. It's a fun gameplay that comes with it, and be able to set our decks up for future possibility. Sylvan Library is another enchantment that's crazily expensive, but this was legitimately draw fuel that will end up helping out. Because at the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn, For each of those cards, you can pay 4 life or put the cards back on top of your library. So if we feel like that we really want the cards, we can pay 4 life for each card that we end up keeping. It gives us more draw fuel, more chances to look over through it, and more chances to find bears. We want to find as much bears, and we want to find trample and make counters. That's the biggest thing that we want to do with this deck. Talking about that, and natural growth became an all-star. Because at the beginning of each combat, not just your combat, each combat. So during your opponent's turns, each of those, whenever they go to combat, we get to double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. I don't know how many times I ended up having my bear that's like a 10-10. Oh, now it's a 20-20. Now they can't come through and be able to get through that wall. Or I'll be able to kill that person with commander damage. It's amazing stuff that comes out of that. Now we're going to jump over to the lands. I'm going to give you a heads up. There's a little bit of change that I didn't do with the update with this deck, and I'm going to do it afterwards. We have Blighted Woodland. It's a little bit of ramp that we end up coming with. Castle Grambrig. And it's a little creature ramp that can go with it. So Field of the Ruin and Ghostly Quarter. They kind of fill the same role that we end up having. There's a bunch of land sets out there that has that repercussions for it. So you have like Tabernacle, that's a pain in the butt. Maze of Ith, that's a pain in the butt as well. Because we can't end up getting through or be able to do the combat damage that we want to do with our queen. This allows us to take care of that problem. So we can sacrifice a land. Or in this case, we can pay 2 and sacrifice it and destroy a target non-basic land. Which is what we end up wanting to do because we want to take out that Mace of Ith. Because we're getting sick and tired of them keep on preventing us to be able to attack them. So that's a way that we can end up doing that. This little oasis allows us to be able to give a +1/+1 bonus, or +3/+3 bonus to our bears before we end up going to combat. So we get to push one of our bears up and over. Karn's Bastion allows us to perforate. Memorial of Unity allows us to be able to find more bears. Mossrip Bridge allows us to be able to find something with the hideaway ability. And then once we get a power of 10 or more, we can pay 1 green, tap it, and be able to play that card without having to pay its mana cost. Myriad Landscape is more ramp. Nykthos, Shrine of Nyx, or 1 color deck. So this is actually going to be some hardcore ramp that's going to be coming out there. If you notice, right over here, Vivian costs us 3 green. So that's 3 green mana that we can be getting with Nykthos. Just with the Planeswalker right there. Or, if we come over here, this Unnatural Growth, that has a cost of 5, but 4 of it has to be green. So that's 4 that's going towards our devotion. We can come pretty heavy core into our devotion. And that Nykthos can end up coming in the clutch. Oran Reef, the Vastwood, allows us to be able to tap it and put a +1/+1 counter for each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. We have a whole bunch of creatures, and let's be honest, 90% of them are green. So it's kind of a nice little thing that will be able to get a +1/+1 counter, and we have ways that we can end up doubling it or adding more counters to them. Plaza of Heroes is a newer acquisition that we ended up putting into the deck. It's nice because it taps for a colorless. Then we can add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell. Okay, well, we're in green, so we're not so worried about it. Add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. Okay, big shocker for us. We're not really super worried about this. But this last ability is what we're super worried about. You can pay 3 and exile it. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Another way to protect our queen. We got to protect that queen. Commander damage is a thing, especially with this deck. Go over, maul an opponent, take them out, and you don't magically have to worry about the board that they have. How do we end up going over there if they have blockers, though? Quite simple. Rogue's Passage. That's right, we could pay for it, tap this land, and make our creature indestructible or unblockable. Fun story, I had a friend that ended up playing another commander that ends up having commander damage mattering. He had a whole bunch of damage, and he was making an offer on my turn. He's like, I won't kill you next turn, because his creature was big enough to be able to take me out if you don't hit me with anything. And I'm like, well, no, you're threatening me, so I feel like you poked the bear. Rule number 1 with bears, you don't poke the bear. If you're playing against them, make sure you don't poke that bear. So instead, I ended up going all right through and killing him with commander damage because the big old queen always wants to be superior to it. Scavenger grounds is something that we end up needing to be able to sacrifice and remove a desert and exile all cards from all graveyards. With how it is nowadays, graveyard shenanigans is in most of the decks, so you gotta be able to take care of that resource. That's why I also ended up cutting one of these snow basics for another desert that was in there, which I can't remember what the desert does. I want to say it was like a simple +1 or more ++, but not exactly sure. But I ended up going with it just because it's a desert, and that it would end up helping us out in the long run to be able to keep down that graveyard. Talking about the snow cover forest, there is a reason that they're in this deck, and we'll break it down once we get over to the creatures. But you want to go down the snow cover forest because it gives us a nice little bump over to it. Plus, it has some decent art that comes with it. Strip mine is another way to be able to take care of those problemsome lands. And then the final land is Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. It gives all of our lands into a forest, so it kind of helps us mana fix. I know it's mono green, but there's be surprisingly amount of times where you end up not having the green that you end up wanting to have. So now we covered a big bulk of the deck. Let's go over to the stars of the show. That's right, we're gonna go check out some bears. Funny thing is Adapt Automaton is a construct, but when it comes into battlefield, we get to choose a creature type. We're always choosing bears, obviously. Creatures of the chosen type end up getting +3 or +1/+1. This is one of those cards that I'm seriously thinking about getting an altar done up with it. I'm a big Thundercats fan, and I'm thinking about getting burbles put on it because they're like a little construct. And guess what they are? Bears. And this, 100% of the time, is going to be a bear when it comes into the battlefield. For me, it's going to be a flavor win, and I can't wait to get it done. And then we have Alpine Grizzly. Has no abilities, but it's a 4/2 bear. Ashcoat Bear has flash. Valerian Bale is another bear. That's a 2/2 for 2. So it's a classic bear that has some possible deniability. You'll see down the road. Bear Cub is so adorable. How can you not play it? Bronvo Sovereign. So this is another unique creature that ends up helping us out. We're trying to extend the viability of our bears. We could pay 1 and a green to be able to have a copy of that bear that just came in with Bronvo Sovereign. But it also gives us a political where we want to be able to help the opponent with something to be able to take care of the problem and be able to copy their creatures as well. Well, make them have a copy of their creatures, I should say. Chameleon Colossus is a changeling, so it's technically a bear. Has protection from black, so that kind of helps out. And then we can end up making it big. You know how I say trample is a big thing? This is part of the reason that trample is huge. You can make this creature as big as you want, but a 1/1 can still block it just as easy as anything else. So we need that trample damage to be able to rock it through. Dragon Scar Bear is a bear that ended up taking down the dragon and still living about it. I mean, come on. Plus, as formidable, that means if we have a power of 8 or greater, we could tap 2 and be able to regenerate Ruin-Scarred Bear. Activate this ability only if your creatures have a total power of 8 or greater. So it's another way we could keep the bear on the board. Dragon's Familiar is one of those bears that bond with its soul, making it so bound with another bear. And when that happens, both of the bears get +2/+2. Eternal Witness, her main job is to help out, and if anything ends up with the graveyard that we want, we play her and bring it right back. Goreclaw makes creature spells with a power of 4 or greater, cost 2 less. Also, whenever we have it or Goreclaw attack, creatures that cost 4 or more, or has a power of 4 or greater, gets +1/+1 and gains trample. Can't say enough how big trample is with this deck. It's huge. Grizzly Bears. Good old classic. Kamal. So this is something unique with this guy. You have the ability to be able to pay 5 and creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample. Huge ending the game threat right there. But that's not it. We have shenanigans that we can end up doing. Because bears got to feed, right? Well, we could pay 1 green and make a target land into a 1/1 creature until end of turn. And it's still a land. So we could have land removal that goes over with it. But what's another little bit of shenanigans that you come over with it? People like to wrath the board, right? With him all in there, we could pay 1 green and start changing their lands into creatures. So when they wrath the board, they're taking out their lands as well. Oh, you're going to wrath? You're going to take out the bears, huh? You think you're going to set us back? Nope. We're denying you of your resource now. Revenge. Mass Vandal is a nice little addition as well, where we end up exiling a creature card from our graveyard, and if we do, we get to exile an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Metallic Mimic is also another creature that's a shapeshifter that we can end up causing it into becoming a bear. And then we have each creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. Heavily into the +1/+1 counters. Mother Bear is exactly what she is, but we end up exiling her and we get to put 2/2/2 green bears on tokens on the battlefield. We only can activate that as a sorcery, but it's very bearable. I can't believe I went with that. That was a pretty plausible of a joke. And then we also have Nylea that ends up giving trample, which is the main reason that we have it. A nice little buff that it has with +2/+2 until end of turn on a target creature we control. Owl Bear, nice little draw field with the keen senses, and a little bit of trample already. Owl Bear Club has Mama's Coming. Whenever Owl Bear Cub attacks, a player who controls 8 or more lands, look at the top 8 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that player. Put the rest at the bottom of the library in a random order. So, nice little flavor win if you end up having this attack and then have an Owl Bear come in with it. But you could go next level with this and make it, well, should I say, a grizzly experience, because it's Mama coming, right? What's better than having Mother Bear come in chasing after you? I've had that happen in the match, and it was quite amazing flavor win for the days. Pale Bear is an island walk bear. Professor Zoomancy is a bear that brings in a 1/1 green-black pest token. And that token has, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. A nice little cheap blocker. Realm Walker is another bear that we end up making that's a shapeshifter. We get to choose a creature type, and then we can play cards from the top of our library as from the creature type. and we get to look at that at any time. River bear is a bear that has island walk. Ruined Claw Bears is the classic 2-2 for 2. Ruxa takes our bears that have no abilities and makes it so that when he comes into the battlefield, we'll be able to bring him or bring them back, or when they attack. And then if they have no abilities, they also get +1/+1, and they can also do damage as though they weren't blocked. Spectre Bears is a bears with a downside. Causes 2 for a 3/3, okay. But the big downside about that is that they don't untap during our next untap step. And now this is the main reason that we have the snow-covered lance that comes over with it. The Spirit of Amangard causes 4 for a 0/4. It's a snow creature with just a bear spirit. And it does catch the spirit pretty well because when it enters the battlefield, we get to search for a snow land that comes in the battlefield. And we get to put that into our hand. So it's a little bit of kind of rampage. But the big reason for this is that it gets +1/+0 for each other snow permit that you control. So if we have 3 snow lands out there, it'll get +3/+0 while we end up having that out there. It's a nice little addition bonus. Striped Bears is a bear that comes in. We get to draw a card. Uvenwall Bear is a bear. When something dies, we get to put 2 +1/+1 counters when it comes in the battlefield if something died that turn, and put it on the target bear that we want. Universal Automaton is a cheap little bear. Well, it's technically a changeling, but you get the thing. We end up playing a bear. Vivian's Grizzly allows us to look for more bears within the top cards of our library. Werebear, Rampage. But if we have Threshold, it gets +3/+3, so it becomes a bear that can end up having a little bit of an edge. And it does exercise direct to bear arms. And finally, but not least, is Wilson Refined Grizzly. It's a 2/2 for 2. It's another one that could end up being counted on Commander. And it can't be countered. Has Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and Ward 2. So that means if they end up targeting it, they have to pay 2 extra to be able to target it. And it's a choose a background. So if you have this as a commander, you can end up choosing the background for it. I'm technically trying to work on a deck that has this guy as the commander. And it allows us to dip into a multicolor with the background. I want to go Golgari Bears. And I think that's going to be a nice little mixture that will be able to go with it. So that's Bear Force 1. We end up playing our queen that allows us to be able to play all the different bears that we end up having. And giving off a whole bunch of counters that comes with it. So we can end up spreading across, or we could be going up tall with our queen. If you do end up playing this deck, you want to make sure you end up having it where you don't have your queen exposed too often without having some kind of protection. I normally like to end up having at least one piece of protection when I played the queen to be able to protect her. Also, my favorite thing is to go over and maul the opponent down right with commander damage. See, it allows this to end up happening because I love it when people like commander damage doesn't matter. This deck makes commander damage a huge threat. I don't know how many times I ended up killing people with commander damage. I have to say that's the main way that I end up killing people, to be dead honest with you. So with that said, why don't you go down to the like button, give it a good old swipe if you're liking the video that we're putting out. And while you're over there, you might as well maul that subscribe button and hit that bell to be notified whenever we come out with new content. And do you play bears? If so, what would you suggest? And if you don't, what would you suggest as well? Put it down in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. And until next time, make sure you don't poke that bear.